Any other opponents today?
Good afternoon. My name is Dorothy Johnson. I live at 2603 North 32nd Street, Omaha, Nebraska 68111. I am born, raised, and currently residing in North Omaha, District 2 to be exact. And I wanted to come up here because I couldn't miss the opportunity to showcase the amount of diversity that you have with the opposition of item number 50. I too understand the difference between item 50 and item 51. I can read and I can read between the lines as well, sir. For me, I want you all to be aware of the fact that we know what is trying to be done here. And because we know, whether we're in this meeting or in community, we understand the prideful, egotistical, oppressive nature of item 50. I'll speak to item 51 next. But I want to showcase the diversity. I'm sure me and some folks in this room have never agreed, perhaps, but I want to showcase that you have folks that are far left, folks that are far right, perhaps Democrats and Republicans. And I think you all are being a little bit aggressive, not even passive aggressive. This is aggressive. This is oppressive. It is targeting and scapegoating, and we know it. Ms. Melton, I don't think you've looked up from that paper as people have been opposing, but the aggressive nature of what you've asked your legal department to do. This is the space where we hold you all accountable to what you all do, and you'll vote as you vote, but I couldn't miss the opportunity to stand with these gentlemen in opposition of what you're trying to do here and on the next item. We can read, and we can read between the lines. We know the temperature of the tempers that have flared amongst you all. So I hope you all take that into consideration as you pass this next vote, that we know what you're saying. And additionally, I struggle as an African American woman looking at one only African American and African American female before me. So if we were to go to vote, right, if this was in your hands, she stands no chance against the majority. So I do believe that this decision's code of conduct decisions should lie with the people because your numbers just aren't reflective of this community appropriately based on representation. Before I close, I want to let you know I am qualified to stand here, but I don't have the votes to sit where you are. But I do work with the NAACP, and I am the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at a global venture capital firm, and I provide instruction and guidance in 46 markets, including Germany, Puerto Rico, Alaska. So we can read, and we can read between the lines here. And I just ask that you all be mindful of what you're saying and what you're doing, because we should be one community, one city that does good for all, not just good for some. But it's incredibly relational and personal, and we know it. So I hope you guys stop that for the sake of integrity of not just this council, but for this city, because Norfolk is watching and Lincoln is watching, Grand Island is watching. And I just want to leave you all with that, but happy to stand in solidarity with Joe Fox, who I went to high school with, and I'm not sure of that gentleman's name. But we have never agreed at these meetings, and I wanted to call out that we agree today. And we believe that these decisions, code of conduct decisions, I am a little less aware of the charter, but code of conduct, let's leave that with the community. And I believe you guys are overstepping by trying to make these kind of decisions above our head. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents today? If not, I'm going to close public hearing. Mr. Harding, you're recognized.
Yeah, just a couple points of clarification. Bernard,
I'll ask the question maybe as you're walking down, but so the cover letter says absent for 4 consecutive weeks, but the ordinance says it is 4 consecutive meetings, and I want to make sure that the intent is the 4 consecutive meetings, not the 4 consecutive weeks, as stated in the cover letter.
Now, as the language in the ordinance, that's the actual change to the code is 4 consecutive meetings that are unexcused,
Yeah.
and that's also the language that would be in the ballot question.
Okay. Then the second question is, if the code of conduct is not approved, then we would have to amend, and since these will both be on the agenda next week for a vote, not that that means they're both voted on next week, but if the code of conduct is not approved, then we would have to amend the language of this one that we're considering now, or talking about now, before it would go to the election commissioner for a vote, no?
I don't think so, because the
Okay.
reality is, let's say the code of conduct that's before you is not adopted, and this ordinance is, and this ordinance is approved. Section 8 of the part that adds the thing only talks about a violation of code of conduct if you've approved one. You could have the language in the charter, and to the extent that you've never approved a code of conduct,
Then it's not there.
it's moot to some extent, but
And certainly
it
that
could remain there.
contemplates that if at a future time, if the code of conduct were approved,
Yes,
and it could be amended over time,
absolutely.
that way it's still included in the language that would be in what would be the charter amendment, if it were approved. It gives that flexibility to make those changes in that.
Correct. The charter amendment is not approving a particular code of conduct. It has nothing to do, it doesn't approve, it's not contingent upon the code of conduct that's item 51 on the agenda.
Right.
It just basically says, if there is a code of conduct that's been approved by the council after a public hearing, then that language is enforceable.
And that's one of the reasons why I was trying to make the point of order. It was not an affront, it was not in disrespect toward any person. And I'm sorry it was read that way. And then the last item I have on this one is if because of the results of redistricting and a council member becomes not a resident of the district they were elected from because of redistricting, is that something that we should probably consider? I know in the past, the practice has been, once you're on the council, generally, if there's a redistricting done at that time, that you don't redistrict someone out of their council. But I do remember a point in time when that happened, and I think it was Mark Kraft and Warmong Low ended up having to run against each other. So should we have some consideration as to language if a council member, as a result of redistricting, no longer lives in the district from which they were elected? I don't think that should be grounds for removal.
Well,
That's my personal opinion.
The way it's currently written, if you're no longer in your district for whatever reason, you would forfeit your position.
Okay.
If it was the will of the council that the charter amendment proposed charter amendment read something else, and we wanted to codify that and put that in the language of the charter, certainly we could do an amendment to that
I might have a
effect.
conversation later then. Thank you. That's all I had on this one.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you. Bernard, these questions are for you. Not that it matters much, but correct me if I'm wrong.
No.
You made mention of the city council member having an issue 2 years ago. My memory says that that issue took place last year, April of 2023.
And I might have misstated the year. I was obviously referencing Mr. Palermo and his absences from the council.
Okay, so the only reason why I brought that to your attention, because it really doesn't matter much, because I knew what you were talking about. However, sometimes because of different cultural backgrounds, things are stated and we interpret them differently. And when we look at the code of conduct here that's being proposed, I'm afraid that the individuals being of one particular cultural, having one ethnicity, they may just as well make the mistake of siding with someone being at fault or in error simply because of those differences, which is another reason why the conversation from my perspective as it relates to committee appointments and things like that has been echoing in this city council because of those differences. The people that I serve don't necessarily walk the talk of the majority. Far too often, they can be misperceived. So it's quite concerning that we can have a tool that can do a knee-jerk reaction that would criminalize or punish a person that has been placed in an elected official role.
I don't think a code of conduct criminalizes. I just want to be clear. Legally, it doesn't. I do appreciate your rest of your point is well taken. I mean, obviously, when Mr. Palermo was arrested, I believe in December of 2022, year and a half, whatever, and I appreciate he wasn't removed till later, but that's what I was referencing. Obviously, that's a different type of conduct that we're
Right,
talking
but-
about here.
but
And I
my-
understand your point.
My point is that I tend to shrug that off when you say that, when it's not on point.
Well.
However, we have individuals that when someone says something as a point of a different way, and because they didn't walk the same mile of that person's shoes as the other, far too often we take knee-jerk reactions and go so far as removing people from committees, meetings, without conflict resolutions. So I guess my question to you is, you took a legal oath to be equipped with all of these dynamics of various viewpoints. And we all know, especially when you are computer-minded, that when we went into the world of Windows, we know that we can journey to one destination 8 different ways. And unfortunately, we're going to have conversations that are going to be taken 8, 9, 10, 15 different ways. So again, the wording of this proposed code of conduct is quite concerning. And unfortunately, it fringes on constitutional rights. It fringes on discrimination. I can go on and on, but I ask that the law department be cognizant of that, because this could very well move into a slippery slope.
And I have no doubt that Mr. Kuzi, when he's here to address the code of conduct, which is the next item on the agenda, will address some of those questions. I don't think there's constitutional problems with the charter amendment. again, I do appreciate your point, because I understand that that's part of the point. That's not necessarily the entire point that you're trying to make. I do understand your point. We all have different backgrounds. We can all make presumptions about what other people do, what they've walked in their shoes. None of us truly know what other people are. And I appreciate that's part of what you're saying. I understand
And
that.
that's why it's so crucial, before we arrive at a destination point of a decision about what happened during an interaction, that we have time out, one. Two, we talk about those things. Not talking about those things and continuing to exclude is a form of discrimination.
Well,
Now, with that being said, let's talk a little bit about the city and what mechanisms it has for code of conduct with city employees, which is different than elected official, and rightly so. But when a city employee talks down or disrespects a political official, what remedy is in place for us to address that?
just like every city employee has bosses, there's a process. You can make a complaint. We have a department that investigates complaints. We obviously have collective bargaining agreements. We've got Chapter 23. We have city policy. We've got executive orders, all that create rules that apply to city employees. And I think part of the reason we're here is because none of those things apply to this particular elected body, but those things do apply. Now, I appreciate if you make a complaint to the mayor about the actions of somebody, and I appreciate you seem to be talking about some specific factual things, and I don't think I'm not comfortable having those discussions relative to what this is, because this isn't supposed to be a specific factual thing. But if you have a complaint about actions of a specific employee, obviously there's a mechanism. You can make that to the department director if it's a subordinate, to the mayor if it's a department director. They can do whatever investigation they feel or direct whatever is important. Talk to the human resources department about what's appropriate. There is a standard that's out there, and ultimately somebody will make a determination as to whether or not they felt that contact violated the rules that are in place and
So-
whether discipline's appropriate.
So if a complaint was made about behavior of a city employee to an elected official, how long would it take for an investigation to be complete? Would it take one day? Would it take a week? What's the typical turnaround time for an investigation? Would it include speaking to both parties? What would that look like?
Well, every investigation is different. So I can't tell you it's going to take a day or a month or 6 months. We have investigations that take several months. Part of it's you make a complaint. If, for example, the interaction is videotaped, there may not be a need to interact with other people. If the conversation occurs someplace else outside of where that is, you might interview witnesses. In some instances, we interview the complainant. In some instances, we don't. I mean, and I don't do the investigations generally. Generally, the Human Resources Department does. But I don't think it's a fair question to me, said, I want you to write me a little list and tell me it's going to be done in a day. I can't do that. Every investigation is different.
Have you ever seen an investigation done in one day?
Yes?
Okay.
And I've seen them take almost a year.
Oh, okay. So I'm in agreement with most of what I've heard before here today, that if we were to be honest, why are we having a code of conduct being looked at now when we had a charter review committee in 2022 that looked at the charter? And
Did it?
things that needed to be reviewed should
Correct.
have been identified.
Certainly, items.
One recommendation was
Mhm.
code of conduct. Correct me if I'm wrong. Code of ethics, correct terminology, code of ethics. And it was that committee, that charter, was told to table that item. And we went on with some other things, right?
I don't recall
Okay.
a discussion about code of ethics.
We
And as far
remember-
as who's tabling it, please appreciate the charter convention is the one that determines what goes forward or not. I don't know who would tell them to table it. It certainly would not be anybody in my department.
Okay. So we do agree that we did have a charter review in 2022.
Absolutely.
Where did this land in all of that? How come it didn't bubble up to the top?
I don't know the answer. The question, what was discussed by the charter convention was generally things that were brought by department heads, some from the administration, from council members. There was another group that provided suggestions, and obviously members of the public, and then a number of the charter amendments were self-initiated by the charter convention.
So you see the essence of why some of the comments that came forth. Because we had a charter review 2 years ago, and this did not bubble up. So we still have not received an explanation as to why this is bubbling up now versus waiting until another charter review is to be done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harding.
Bernard, if you wouldn't mind, the charter review is, I mean, we're required to do that at least every 10 years.
Correct.
And those, whatever comes out of the charter convention, we are to consider, or we can consider moving them forward or not.
Correct.
Any charter amendment or proposed amendment can come at any time from any one of us, the mayor. It's not just from the charter convention that the amendments to the charter are to be considered. Those can come from a whole host of different avenues. It's
Correct. The position of the city attorney's office for 40 or 50 years is that, yes, charter amendments can be suggested by the mayor or the council. The mayor can suggest it, but by the way, in order for it to be put on the ballot, the council
be
has to
approved.
adopt an ordinance authorizing it to be placed on the ballot. So, I mean, frankly, most of the charter amendments historically that are not part of the charter convention are probably initiated by the council itself.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was clear too. Thank you.
Just a couple questions for you too, Bernard. And I want to say I appreciate the testimony today. And I think when you consider things like this, you do really have to walk around them and think about all the implications of something like this and the next item too. I happen to agree with the Charter Convention recommendation that a city council member should explicitly live in their district if that's who they've been voted to represent. And it's a little surprising that's not currently in our document. So I understand why they recommended that be added here. But there are circumstances, as Mr. Harding was identifying, that we maybe need to think about in that respect. I think what we've experienced with unexcused absences was too long. 3 months worth of unexcused absences is too long, in my opinion. And I think that was the clear majority of what I heard from South Omaha residents at the time, that 3 months was too long for unexcused absences. We do still have 6 months worth of excused absences.
Correct.
And that has happened before too,
It has.
for health reasons. But that would not be a topic under unexcused absences like that contemplates. As to the third part of this, which I think is the real, most of what we're hearing today, that was my follow-up question too, was if that particular provision under Code of Conduct is included in this charter amendment and goes to voters, and if it's approved by voters, that does not obligate the council to pass a Code of Conduct. It
does
means
not.
they could, but they don't have to, right?
Correct.
And then this is more for the next item, but that next item is the Code of Conduct, which is an ordinance. So that, in fact, would not have to be adopted if the council chose not to.
Correct.
Okay. And then one more question about timing. There is a timing concern with both of these charter amendments, or any
Correct.
charter amendment,
Correct.
in terms of consideration prior to going on the ballot. I believe that deadline from the election commissioner is September 1st.
Correct. You have to approve it at a council meeting prior to September 1st.
So that could be done on any of our next meetings, which are the 6th, the 20th, or the 27th.
Yeah. It's just, I think it was brought forward with knowing that if there was a 1 or 2 week layover, you could accommodate that in your schedule, but any more than that, and then they would be foreclosed from being on the ballot this November.
Okay. So those two items today do have that deadline, if you will, to be considered,
Correct.
but the ordinance does not.
The ordinance does not.
Thank you. Mr. Hardy?
I just want to be clear. So
If it were not voted on until the 27th, and it needs to be does the ordinance have to be in effect by the time it goes to the election commissioner, or does it just need to be
The
passed?
position we've taken is it has to be adopted and signed by the mayor.
Okay.
I.e., if the mayor would veto it, that would obviously
Sure.
potentially do it. But we've not implemented the 15-day period for
That's
implementation
what I
of the
wanted to
ordinance.
be. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any further lights on this item. Next item.
Item 51, an ordinance to amend Chapter 2, Article 2, Division 1 of the Omaha Municipal Code entitled Generally by adding Section 2-25 to provide for a code of conduct as communication in opposition.
The public hearing on number 51 is today. We'll start with a brief presentation by Mr. Kuzi.
Matt Kuzi, City of Omaha Law Department. What the council has before it today in this ordinance on agenda item number 51 is a code of conduct for city council members. I'll go through an overview of the code, and then I have a couple of comments to make due to some of the issues that were brought up in an attempt to address those at the forefront. This code of conduct was developed by the law department with at the urging and at the request of the law committee to prepare a code of conduct for city council members. This code of conduct, the council has the inherent authority to make this code of conduct by virtue of 2 sections in the charter that are referenced in the ordinance 2.04 and 2.11 of the Omaha Municipal Charter allows the code of conduct to be created by a city council and bind this council and future councils to this code of conduct. Specifically, it creates a code of conduct where, in terms of how council members have to conduct themselves, as Mr. Indenbosch indicated, and I will reiterate again, all city employees who are not elected are bound by the HR policies, executive orders from the mayor, all of the human relations ordinances contained in Chapter 23. That includes all the directors and the employees of those directors. Council members are excluded from those requirements. This would be an acknowledgement by the council that they will subject themselves to those HR policies. There is a list of official misconduct that is on there. Included in there is also an ability for council members to submit to the law department for advisory opinions on their actions. No code of conduct would be useful without some sort of enforcement mechanism. Considering all due process rights for council members, the law department created a system by which the enforcement of this code of conduct can be done in terms of how complaints are made, how complaints are reviewed. In addressing one concern that I know has been raised, it is the fact that the complaints are made to the city attorney, and that the city attorney and the human resources director reviews initial complaints and makes an initial determination of whether it should go forward or should not go forward. Both the city attorney and the human resources director, we are not elected. So there is a provision in this code whereby our decisions are then reviewed and validated by an elected official, that being either the council president or a committee composed of council members to review that. As you read on in the ordinance, there's a provision for how the enforcement is made. 5 votes are required to do anything under this code of conduct. 5 votes was not created at random. 5 votes represents a 2/3 majority of the council, and I will reference 2/3 majority in my closing remarks. But if 5 council members find that there has been a violation, there is a public hearing. At all times, the offending council member is allowed to plead his or her case either in executive session or in open session. Much like the graduated sanctions that are located in our municipal code for graduated discipline that employers can impose on the employees, there's also a measure of graduated sanctions in here: censures, reprimands, calls for resignation, expulsion from the meeting, remove committee assignments, or other lawful action that the city council deems appropriate. It also takes into consideration whether an offense occurs during the meeting and how that can be handled. This code of conduct is not unique to Omaha. Ms. Weston made reference to it in her remarks that there are a multitude of cities that have enacted codes of conduct. I have repeated numerous times that the city of La Vista in Nebraska has had a code of conduct since 2004. Codes of conduct are becoming more common in the United States to address whatever needs that they feel that they need to address. The United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives have codes of conduct that have existed for quite some time. There has been a number of statements made about removal of an elected official and how that is unconstitutional or uncalled for. The ability to remove an elected official for conduct has existed since the founding of the United States. It's embedded in the Constitution. Presidents can be impeached. Article 1, Section 5 of the United States Constitution allows members of Congress, the House of Representatives, and the United States Senate to be removed by a 2/3 vote. The Nebraska Constitution, at Article 3, Section 10, allows for the expulsions of members of the legislature, again, by a 2/3 vote. The removal of an elected official because of offending conduct that rises to a level where they should be expelled because of it is not unique. It has existed since 1789 when the Constitution was ratified, and has existed since the Nebraska Constitution was adopted. These concepts are not new and they are not uncommon. There are some commonalities that you will find in codes of conduct throughout the United States, and I looked at ones: Texas, Kansas, California, Washington, Canada, even La Vista's code of conduct. There are some commonalities in what is included in them in terms of what are the expectation for codes of conduct. This is a code of conduct that this council, if adopted, that you would subject yourselves to and that you subject future councils to, and how their behavior is governed. The council was provided with this code of conduct in draft form on Thursday, July 11th, both in electronic form and paper form, to give the council sufficient time to communicate with the law department with any issues or concerns or adoptions or changes that any of them wanted to be made. With the exception of Councilmember Harding, there were no communications to the law department from anybody on the council outside of the law committee on any of these issues. But that is why additional time was given to the council. So that was July 11th, was 1 week prior to this even appearing on the council's agenda for first reading the following Thursday, the 18th. I will remain obviously in my seat in the back to answer any questions that the council may have of me.
Okay, thank you. Any other proponents?
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I am totally opposed to this, mainly because you're probably
Larry,
going to come
this is
through.
proponents. Are you in favor of this?
I'm a proponent, yes.
You're in favor?
Yes, I'm a proponent.
You just said you're opposed.
I'd like to speak as to why, if you'll let me.
Okay,
Please, this is my time, I think.
making it clear.
The reason I want to be a proponent is I want the citizens to find out how utterly ridiculous and unconstitutional this is. Mr. Constitution up there, by the way, did you not read the Declaration of Independence? Okay? Back at the time that those things started, there was a king that had rules and codes of conduct. That if he didn't like it, off with their head. You know what? The citizens decided that the king's code of conduct wasn't necessarily good. And they decided that king needed to go. So you're citing lawfare out of the lawyers' dictionaries, and you're not talking with the people that you should be talking with that are telling you, we don't want you guys making the code of conducts for our candidates, whether they be the mayor, the governor, the president, or one of these little 7 Indians here that vote against us. Supermajority, whatever you want to call it. That's not supposed to be your prerogative. I'm supposed to be able to vote her in and out. And I would vote her in and out on the basis that she's been reading for 2 hours instead of listening. Code of conduct, you can have that vote right today. Not listening to your constituents. Code of conduct. Thank you.
Any other proponents? Those in favor? Seeing none, any opponents?
Luis Jimenez, 2709 Dewey Avenue. First off, I want to thank Mr. Harding for making a point of order. I appreciate clarifications. I think you guys should be doing more often. I think the council should be helping and holding the president accountable more often for the proceedings. You know, you do a point of order for if there's confusion or if you want to reorientate the meeting. I think that's appropriate. So thank you, Mr. Harding. So the point I want to make about democracy is that a council member being removed or, you know, pass away does not inhibit their district to send a council member again. Just because somebody is removed doesn't mean that the people can't send a representative again. So democracy will prevail even if a council member is removed or passes away. Just want to be clear that you will want to have this come here because of individual council members. I think that's the appropriate thing to say. Because there is a difference between a special session of the council and a committee meeting of members of the council. The code of conduct, I believe, and I hope you will hear me out again about this, shouldn't be on the city charter or shouldn't be in the codes. It should be stated that there is a rule, there's a code of conduct and your rules of order, and then have a separate document from that lists the code of conduct. And you can do that at a regular session of the council, or you can do it every 2 years when you approve your rules of order. You don't need to go through all these processes and be like, oh my goodness, what are we going to include in the code of conduct? One session you can have a code of conduct, another session you just drop the whole thing. It's your prerogative. So I'll close with this, that I remain with the idea that you don't need to be explicit about why you want to remove one of the council members. You have a vote. The motion of no confidence is the reasoning to remove a council member, and then you vote on it if you want to go ahead with the motion or not. And then one last point. I agree with the comments about the code of conduct. It's like, what should be in the code of conduct and who is pushing for the particulars? I don't think that the city attorney or the human resources director should be the ones to take into consideration your conduct. It's none of their business. I think the responsibility lies with individual council members. I think you can take an issue to a committee, send it to a committee and say, okay, can you review this conduct and then bring it back to the council? It needs to stay within the format of council meetings. Okay. Thank you.
Other opponents?
Thank you again, Anthony Carifa Rogers Wright, 3010 Lincoln Boulevard. I would just start by saying, with due respect to the city attorney, I think it was pretty tone deaf to evoke the ability to impeach the president when a rogue and renegade Supreme Court with a lower approval rating than former Cornhusker football coach Scott Frost just granted presidential impunity. So I don't think that that was a very, very good example. But I would like to start to say that I have no doubts that there's universal consensus that the fair and professional treatment of our city employees must be enacted and maintained. Heaven knows, based on the fact that we're even giving this ordinance the time of day, it's clear that city employers are working much harder to serve the people than the people's government and its elected officials. That said, what this ordinance does is pave a pathway to rapid escalation in lieu of proactive mediation. Are we the people really to believe that adults whose primary duty it is to serve the people of this city cannot resolve differences without immediately resorting to lawsuits? I'm gravely concerned that this proposal is aimed at a specific city council member rather than aimed at improving relationships between city council members and city employees and fostering greater efficacy and efficiency to address the myriad challenges facing the city. And yes, given the fact that this city council member in question is a Black woman, my concerns are visceral, personal, and very further warranted. Members of the City Council, Mr. President, while the city paid a sum of $131,725 to the National League of Cities to, in the words of Mayor Stothert, quote, develop consistency in how we work to expand a culture of inclusion in the city, this proposed ordinance elucidates the fact that a couple of trainings cannot eviscerate a lifetime of learned implicit biases that are ensconced in myriad sectors of our nation, including but not limited to politically, education, entertainment, and environment. As we say in my homeland, Sierra Leone, it is harder to empty a cup than it is to fill it. That all to say, the plain language of the ordinance as written is littered with ambiguity that could engender a season of implicit bias. For instance, sections 2-25D1 and 2-25D2 read, respectively and in part, council members will treat each other, city council staff, and city employees with respect, and stipulates that city council members shall avoid language that explicitly, or wait for it, implicitly threatens physical harm. Councilmember Begley, due respect, you of all people should know about the pitfalls of implicit bias. Because, if I can get my thing to work here. Yeah, I will take my time. I know what's going on. There we go. Councilmember Begley, the pitfalls of implicit bias, because it became a profound component of your run for the office that you now hold when the Omaha Police Officers Association on your behalf sent a repugnant, racist, and reprehensible flyer establishing a feckless nexus between your then opponent, a Black woman, and riots and crime. This act was more deliberate than the Democratic Party setting up Joe Biden to fail during the June 27th presidential debate, and many of us believe that this proposed ordinance is equally deliberate. Ironically, the ordinance is written in section 2-25D4H and 2-25D4I establishes interdiction for creating a hostile work environment in retaliation against city employees. But that's exactly what this proposal will do. This estimable body will be reduced to a circumference of pubescent volatility, taking up more of your time to go after one another rather than coming together to work for the most needs of the people. Poverty, climate change, environmental racism, anemic trust between city residents and law enforcement, and an OPS school system that is under the threat of takeover by the state. Even the process of determining if comeuppance is necessary is perniciously proximate to an evisceration of true and transparent due process that will further reduce the people's government to a proverbial kangaroo court. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, I'll close by saying if you allow this to go through, you are exposing yourselves as incapable of navigating conflict. And if you can't navigate conflict, how and why should the people provide you with the largesse of our sacred trust to navigate the very real problems needing solving yesterday? And in the process of exposing yourselves and reducing the people's trust, it could have the effect of increased voter torpidity at a time when we need more civic engagement than ever. Thank you, and please do much, much better.
Thank you. Other opponents, please.
Hello again. I am Dorothy Johnson. I live at 2603 North 32nd Street in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm born, raised, and currently residing in North Omaha, District 2 to be exact, and I'm here to passionately oppose this item on your agenda. I do believe it is very oppressive, and I respect to the city attorney, but we shouldn't be trying to mimic historic structures in this nation, the city, this state, because although other folks have codes of conduct, there are a lot of rules, there are a lot of laws that we should not try to mimic. So I think that absolutely fell short. I believe this is oppressive in nature. I do believe it is demeaning in nature, and I do believe that this is wrong. There are so many ways that we can choose to enact change, and I believe this is an inappropriate one. I believe it is scapegoating, I believe it is targeting, and I believe it is offensive. I'm an African American woman, and so is my councilwoman, and I could feel her being choked up as she was talking about her experience. So I understand that there are some protections that are being put into place to protect employees, but my question is, who protects my councilwoman? Who mentors my councilwoman? Who calls her after these meetings and asks her if she's okay? If you all can't do that, I will do a better job of that, and that's my promise to you. But I want you all to know is we can read, and we can read between the lines on this specific item on the agenda. We all understand the undertones and the tempers to this item. It is not lost on us. And when you all vote for this or against this or whatever have you, we will know and understand where you stand on these issues. It is not lost on us at all. So just wanted to stand up here and passionately oppose, also vocally and passionately support my councilwoman. And if there's anything I can do for you, please let me know. But today I stand here to be present for you and let you know that you have done an excellent job. Of course, none of these roles are easy, but my question is, how do they pour into you? How do they support you as not only a woman, but also a woman of color, standing up there as one chocolate drop in a sea of sameness? I support you. I do not support this item on the agenda. I think a code of conduct, if it's not culturally revised and reviewed, it is not sound. If it's not reflective, if it's not ran by if it's not ran by the ACLU, NAACP, the African American Affairs Commission on Affairs, if you didn't run it by us, you cannot invoke it on us. If it's not culturally sound or culturally sensitive, that means it is oppressive in nature. If you didn't intentionally try to disrupt the oppressive nature of that document, that means you're okay with it staying in. So again, I am here, and I'll be here next meeting as well to be sure that someone is here to support my councilwoman. But above that, that's all. Have a good day.
Thank you. Next opponent.
Clearly, I'm an opponent of all of y'all, so, because y'all got my letter last week, I'm sure. My name is Sherman Wells. My address 4718 Kansas Avenue. But today, y'all might as well call me Larry, because if I had a MAGA hat, I'd be wearing one right now. But this tactical 88 hat is close enough. It's sad that we are here in 2024 to talk about the government using the law to silence the voice of people. This is modern day Jim Crow. Look at y'all faces. It's disgusting. What's wrong with you, Passive Pete? You can't manage your own council? That you gotta go and create a law? What's the point of you being the president if you can't have order amongst your own peers without making it a law? Because Dave and the mayor don't like the way Dave is spoken to back there. We talking about a mayor who had issues with firefighter President Steve LeClaire because of his endorsement of Heath Mello in 2017 for a mayor. So much so that she botched a case against Steve Claire when he elbowed a black woman in the back 2 years ago. And she was so upset about the endorsement that she leaked information that should have went straight to the police, to the media, which caused that black woman to not get no justice because the mayor trying to use her political position to get back at somebody that did something to her 2 years prior. She spent millions of dollars, city dollars, defending her blunder. Anyway, if you think it's okay for Dave to sit up and ignore questions asked to him, so much so, if you watch the video, Pete and Dave both looked at Dave. Pete and Don Rowe both looked at Dave when she asked the question, and neither one of y'all said, hey, is you gonna answer the question? He just sat back there in his arrogant self. And it's pitiful because they both knew who the question was addressed to. And like I've told you before, if I gotta keep addressing this council, it's gonna be disrespectful. Why? Because you don't show no respect to the people that vote for you. Y'all sit up here and y'all bicker over stupid petty stuff that y'all wanna have your political friendships over and not what the people is telling you. And it's been brought to me numerous times that I should run for District 2 City Council seat. And if I ran, I would win by a landslide. Trust and believe that. Because I do more for my people in my district than any of y'all do for any of y'all districts. Let's get that right. But I don't think I would be able to stomach being around y'all every day, not even once a week on a Tuesday. Because here y'all are wasting people's time and money to make a vote on your in-house fighting, failing to address issues and things that people are actually concerned about, like the unhealthy living conditions in OHA. But that's another topic. And now that faded Ben Gray lost his re-election to District 2, and this so-called law committee, now y'all want to address and pass a law talking about an issue from February. Although it's been 5 months, we still have not forgotten. And I'll end it with this. This meeting with City Council is like being a part of OPS in the 6th grade with a code of conduct. It's a realistic exposure of why every single one of y'all seats need to be replaced by people who remember that your job is to work for people in the district, not to solve your petty house bickering and voting on things that's in favor of your political friendships and relationships. Because I've talked to each and every one of y'all about the unfair treatment that we've been receiving in this town, and none of y'all replied. And yet here we are. With me being banned from OHA, my sister has relapsed on drugs because I have not been able to be there for her because y'all won't step in and tell Joni she wrong for making up lies against me, which I got court for tomorrow. Tired of y'all. All of y'all.
Any other opponents that want to speak today?
Well, my name is Ford Momarts Brown, 1511 Farnham. As I was going to say earlier, the opponents persuaded me that maybe the code of conduct was not such a good idea in its entirety. I still think a code of conduct is needed. However, in reskimming it, I did not notice the term ethics anywhere in there. What's the point of a code of conduct that isn't based on ethics? And I really think those need to be put into the code of conduct, any code of conduct, but also behavior in a democratic manner towards your constituents, towards everybody's constituents, a willingness to listen to them, a willingness to hold town council meetings. These are things that are needed, but also to clear up and have respectful council members and other city employees. But they did bring up a valid point of removing somebody and then having that district sit vacant. People who elect those members, if they're removed, should be able to be represented. And what I would suggest is that the code of conduct be amended in such a way that if someone is removed, immediately that district goes up for another election at the next election. And a scramble for whatever to get enough signatures to put them on there, or for arrangements to be made for people to be put on the ballot to be elected in the next election, whether that be primary, general, special, whatever, so that people don't go in their districts, don't go unrepresented. That is your primary responsibility, is to represent all the constituency. And that's the one big suggestion I would make. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other opponents?
Joe Fox, 461 Harmon Avenue, president of the East Omaha Neighborhood Association. This code of conduct, as it was read by Kuzi and by that young gentleman here, referenced a lot of stuff in here, which I thought should have been read word for word. If we're here to represent and maybe pass this code, why wouldn't you read that word for word into this microphone to the people present, let alone the people of the city of Omaha? Through my recent endeavors and the worry of losing my house to eminent domain and the hammer of the city, I have become a representative of many other people outside of my town, outside of my neighborhood, and outside of my city. Because I've had to help them, like, oh, that's what they're trying to do to us too. And for people to say, oh, they have this in other areas. Well, does it work there? Does it? Omaha, Nebraska it's a gem. It's the middle of the map. It is the most cultural, diverse city known to man. Statistically, break that down if you want to. But as a resident, I was born in Omaha, Nebraska at University Hospital. I've lived in north, east, south, west, a little bit of La Vista, lived there before. I've lived everywhere, okay? I'm a person of this public school system, which by the grace of God, we found our way. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people get left behind in this system if they don't know what they're doing and how to react. So I graduated from Omaha North. I live in District 2. I'm represented by the District 2 representative, and it would be a nightmare if my representative, or if wherever I lived, wasn't in tune with its people like she was and has been when the city came, when this plan put forward by OEDC in Burlington that was long held by the city come forward. If I didn't have that representation at that time, who knows where I'd been. And that's what I would expect of everybody and anybody standing on here. And throughout this thing, I've communicated with the other people, and I've got maybe one email back, tops. I call Juanita Johnson on her phone. She answers, or she texts me, said, I'll take my lunch break at this time, and I'll call you. Okay, and that's how a council member should protect and represent its people. I agree with it. If you creating this law is exposing yourself of not being able to navigate conflict and not being able to express your feelings. And I want to, this might be a little bit of an opinion, but one of it's, to go to the top, be D4H, creating a hostile work environment. The citizens of this city don't hold these chairs, don't work in this, but the hostile work environment, if that's what you think happened there was crazy. In construction or in food service or wherever a hostile work environment is an explanation of being soft or what have you. But I kind of want to move forward to this, is what I read, and this is, which I hope, and I'm a very opposition of this code of conduct being passed, the power it would hold, and it would be, one of them's an expulsion from the meeting, just kick you right out because you had a little bit too emotion and stuff like that, or maybe being even suspended from the next meeting where there could be a very, very important something on the docket and not be able to be represented correctly like I have been represented recently to think that that wouldn't be able, it would ruin everything I've been working for, which is to save my home. Then it goes on to be, you can actually, the council president or other members shall call for a vote on the, if supported by 5 votes, the offending council member can be publicly reprimanded, publicly censored, or expelled from the meeting. What are we doing here? I know what I'm doing here. I'm speaking for the people that I am. I'm human. We're all human. I've said it before. Underneath those threads of those nice clothes that were made by a human, most likely not a machine, as nice as they look, you are human. And if you can't resolve conflict amongst your human selves and you have to bury somebody in paperwork and take the voice from the citizens who are the people that want represented by you, it's confusing. I don't know. I think this code of conduct, I come up with this, and it might not fit correctly, and it's weird that you guys were going to come up with this to conduct yourselves in a better manner. So it's like, I'm going to make up the rules on who and how they can play this game after the game has already started. And that's not fair. I'm going to make up the rules on who and how people are going to play this game after the game has already started. The contest, the game, the race, whatever it may be. The rules are being changed, and what's happening is that, like I said, you're taking this from the people. You're trying to use your power to control this code of conduct and these complaints and everything like that, and it's confusing on why time's being wasted on this and not other things. I don't think the code of conduct should be created by the council at all. Why would an entity be able to self-govern themselves? That is a recipe for disaster, all because people's feelings got hurt. This seems very dramatic, and to use this Vinnie Palermo thing as like the reason why we're going through this, that was a while ago, should have been handled in 2022, and it was not, and now it is, and now it's being dubbed the Vinnie Palermo Code of Conduct. I've seen how you guys act and how others act when she speaks, and it's crazy because I've seen her do the very similar thing as when maybe she excused herself from the bench once other people were talking, and she was called out by like the moderator and stuff. And since I've been here, 3 people have done it. I mean, last meeting I was here, Don Rao voted from, he was over there, he voted. Yep. I don't get into that, but it seems like she has to walk on eggshells around you guys, and now there's been this put in place to where even more so. I don't know. There's 7 humans up here representing, 1.3 million people. I don't know how many people are in this city right now. And for 5 of those people be able to say that something's wrong with one, it doesn't make any sense. There's 1.3 million people in this city. Let us decide who represents us. Please, and thank you.
Thank you. Next opponent, please.
I'm going to try to get this right one time.
Make sure you push it all the way up so yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. All the times I get here and okay. Calling the kiddo black. I wanted to put that up because, I'm sorry. Cheryl Weston, South 13th Street, Omaha, Nebraska. I am definitely opposed to this ordinance and opposed to the way it was put together. And this is, as I said before, you're setting a precedent. You're setting a precedent for future city council people. You're setting something in front of the people who voted you here. And everything I'm going to do in my power, I'm going to do everything in my power to remind people come next year to vote. who you are and what you did. If this should pass, it needs to have time set back. Mr. Cusick, who said that this was communicated to July 8th, on July 8th or thereabout, 2024, and he only had one response from an individual on the city council regarding this. What does that say? The other thing that has been brought out, I think, if this is such a needed thing for this council of people that we elected, human beings, then why didn't you have a town hall meeting, each one of you in your district or for the whole city, to let people know what you are attempting to do? As it's been said before, 7 people, this is like we're in school, folks. You're supposed to be adults, and you can't handle this debate between yourselves. I'm standing here not just because what I have said earlier, I feel that this is really about, not because it's in my district or because it's my district council person. I would stand here and say this about this particular issue, no matter if it was in your district, Mr. Rowe, or your district, Mr. Harding, or your district, Ms. Melt. Any of you, because this is wrong, absolutely wrong. As Mr. Cusick had said, he has researched different counties or cities who have this, and I agree, I researched as well. But it doesn't make it have to be necessary for here in Omaha, Nebraska, as I stated earlier. In this, in Section 225, the citizens of the city of Omaha are entitled to have a fair, ethical, and accountable local government. The purpose of this code of conduct is to establish ethical standards of conduct for members of the city council to ensure that the members act appropriately and to establish a process to determine whether a council member has committed misconduct. Right there from the get-go, you know it's wrong. Because you can't take and evidently you've shown you can't investigate, you can't handle your own conflict. If you were going to have this, why shouldn't there be an oversight committee outside an adversity and diversity committee to look at this? Elected officials are supposed to be bound to carry out and implement the laws of the United States of Nebraska and the city of Omaha. Let's break this down. This is your code that you put here. Councilmen will treat each other, city staff, and city employees and the public with respect and shall refrain from derogatory or harassing remarks. Councilmen members should avoid profanity, personal attacks, verbal abuse, or language, and you should have in here body actions, the rolling of eyes, the snickering, all of that should be in here. Threatens personal harm. The council is committed to fostering a safe and productive work environment, which includes treating others with respect. You went on to say the City of Omaha resource policies. And then exactly in 4A, the first thing you say is discrimination. That's too brief, that's too vague. Discrimination is entirely different to everybody. But if the City of Omaha resource policies have that in place, then why don't you identify? Why don't you say discrimination based upon the City of Omaha's human policy remarks? B, nepotism, we all know what that is. And going down, here's where I have a problem again. On E, use or disclosure of confidential information. What is confidential information or disclosure? Are each of you told when you have a meeting, this is confidential for the city? You cannot divulge that. I understand an executive. I was in corporate rule for many years, probably more than I like to say. But anyway, when we had something in executive session, we knew. When we had a confidential meeting, we knew, and we abided by that. I think, look at all of you, 7, you're business people, you're professional people. You should know that, shouldn't have to be. but it's not even spelled out what is considered to be disclosure or confidential information. Creating a hostile work environment. Hostile, spell out that definition, because what may be hostile to you, Councilman Rowe, may not be hostile to Councilwoman Melton, sorry about that. But there's no definition to show. Hostile work environment, that's vague. All of this is so vague that you put in here. And you know what? There seems to be. This wasn't just a yesterday or a July 11th. This has been on your mind, certain ones, for some time. So why didn't you get it earlier to the people? Why didn't you bring us out early so you're not rushing this through? Retaliation against city employees. That's what this is. This is retaliation. Same way they do, as this gentleman said in OHA, which you are knowledgeable about. This is retaliation. I want to talk to you again when you take and get down to the advisory opinions. You talk about that in a code. When you look at efforts will be made to protect the identity of the complainant. What about the efforts to protect the city council person that this is being against? There is no way that you can individually, and that is a problem not only with city council, it's in anywhere else, the police department and other departments, you cannot, our Supreme Court has shown that you cannot handle investigating yourselves. And then you go on and it says, if this is brought to the person who is being, the complaint is against, they have to get an attorney, pay for. Well, if you're doing this as city and we're paying your salary, pay for that attorney to represent that individual. Conduct a preliminary investigation by the city president or an assigned committee of the city council may be overruled in finding and require city attorney and human resources director to continue with the process. This goes back and shouldn't even be there because it goes back to the very thing in the charter. The city council president, whomever they may be, are the ones that should be able to direct and control the city council members and their behavior and how they represent themselves to the public. In item 7, a violation is found by a vote of 5 council members. Formal resolution of public censure. I mean, let's put this person down, drag them all the way down, because you put it out public after the fact, not before. Formal resolution of a reprimand. Formal resolution of a call for resignation. How dare you take it on that you can call for this person's resignation when it wasn't you who put them there? Expulsion from the meeting. If you have an expulsion from the meeting, how is that district person going to communicate whatever was taken on in that committee meeting to their constituents? You all claim, well, no, I take that back. You didn't all claim, but certain individuals have claimed, oh my God, District 4, they went months without having representation. What do you think it does if you take and expel our representative from your committee meeting? It's no different. We don't get representation. When you look at this, as it said, and many have said before me, what is wrong? Have we become such a society that we cannot help each other to work out our differences? Isn't that why we have a 7, to be diverse, to work out the differences, the conflict? I put up here and I wanted to say, because my grandmother used to tell me this all the time. And my grandmother only had a 6th grade education, but she taught herself how to, and this is this dang new phone, turn it off, trying. I think it's mine. Maybe it's somebody else's. I don't know. But anyway, my grandmother had a 6th grade education. She was a domesticated worker. She became a foster parent. But she used to have these things, which I always call now when I was doing training in my former career as CS. And for those who might not know, CS is called common sense. So she would give me all these little tidbits, and I would use those. And one of them, she said, beware of the pot calling the kettle black. You don't have to go look it up. It's an old cliche, because I got it on the screen for you. The pot calling the kettle black. And that's what I see here. But more important, I see 7 individuals not being able to come together and work something out for the betterment of the people you were set here to represent. And you all know, as the one lady said, we're very capable of understanding, we're very capable of reading, we're very capable of understanding and reading between the lines. And I am truly disappointed in several of you. I truly am. I'm not going to say, because that would be falling into this same characteristics as some of you are in this particular ordinance. But I'm disappointed in you. And I also want to leave, as I said before, I wouldn't be standing here just because this happens to be what we feel is something against our particular elected official. I would do it for anybody because I know it's wrong. And one of the things Martin Luther King Jr. used to say, when you know something is wrong, you should stand. Because if you fall for it, you will fall for anything.
Thank you. Any other opponents that have not spoken yet?
I'll make it real quick. I'm just sitting watching the reaction and accusations and the negative rhetoric, and I'm disappointed in all of us in that we have to do that. I ask that you do not pass this and that we find some resolution and conversation before we create a wedge. And we've got to be more inclusive with people. All of us come from a different perspective. All of us were raised differently, but I think we need to come together as a city, a nation, a state, and work together. And I don't think passing this achieves that, because I know that Councilwoman Johnson feels that this is targeted at her. I would hope that that's not the intent of this. So why don't we prove it to everyone that we're going to do the right thing?
Thank you. Any other opponents that haven't spoken yet? Public hearing's closed. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized. Oh. One more. Go, come on down.
All right. Hi, I'm Nicole LeClaire. I live down the road in Bellevue. I usually don't come to city council.
I just need your address, though. For the
Oh, okay. 1802 Brenda Drive, Bellevue, Nebraska, 68005. I'm usually busy at the, sorry, I ran here, at the Douglas County Commissioner meetings. Never went to a meeting before 6 years ago. I've continued to come. I went to save a building, and the building was saved because the person sued the county. And I'm very concerned looking at this, that this is similar to what's going on with the Juvenile Justice Center and the mess that that is now, an empty building for almost a year, $20,000 a year to pay for that. And many people came to fight that and say all the things that are now happening. But what's happening over there is even worse than how we thought it might be, with the waste and no families and children being helped. Some of you were on the building commission that we spoke to about it. So I just caution you, because there was one person on that board who has consistently gone against that plan. And I don't think it's been comfortable for that person. And if what you're trying to do today would happen there, we need to have voices of people that you do not agree with And we need to see leaders up there hearing each other. In the world we're in that is so divisive right now, we need to see our leaders able to hear each other and still talk to each other afterwards and not block each other because we don't like what they're saying. And I am very concerned for Councilmember Johnson watching a few of these meetings with what is about to occur and is occurring with the millions of dollars now going into that part of town, a part of town that has been severely neglected. And all of a sudden, there's so much interest because of the money going in there. So I just hope that you will reconsider this and just allow people to speak through their representatives and not be afraid of that, because I really feel like even what has happened there could still be better if people will listen to each other and admit, okay, maybe we can rethink this, because by the way, that's having to be rethought. So I caution you to just slow down, think about all the people that Councilmember Juanita Johnson is representing who have not had a voice for how long? Let them have their voice. Please do not be afraid of that. Our city is great, but it can be so much greater if we listen to each other. And I will say, going to all these meetings, I've met such wonderful people and in the community. Not the leaders always, but I just encourage you, your people too, beyond just leaders. So just slow down, and thank you for letting me speak and catch my breath. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Public hearing is closed. Ms. Johnson, I believe your light was on?
I'll save my comments for our next meeting.
Okay. I don't see any further lights today. Madam Clerk.
Non-action items, items 52 through 59, do not require public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on agenda for consideration.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion and a second. Roll call.
Hug. Johnson. Melton.
Yes.
Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Meeting is adjourned at 5:36.
Thank you.